Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, let's talk about a forgotten flipping bait. A lot of people have really forgot about this bait. It's starting to get old and delaminate in their storage boxes in their garage, and it's because it's just fallen out of favor. There's so many cool flipping designs out there, a lot of creature baits, a lot of things that create a ton of action, have flapping craws and curly tails and things like that. But there's one category of flipping soft plastics that I had a lot of success with early on in my career, and really I started revisiting it in the last 2 years and have had a lot of success with it. So I know it still works, and it's just all because people have kind of put their focus on newer designs. But that bait that I'm talking about is the flipping tube. This one right here, it's an ugly bait, man. It's not nothing flashy. You got that tube profile. Usually flipping tubes are packed with salt. They're a little bit beefier as far as like how dense the plastic is. And then you've got kind of a longer profile. So like, I'd say this one's like 4 inches. That seems to be like normal. 4 to 4.5 inches. That's kind of the normal flipping tube profile. But tubes, man, they are still very popular when you go up north. A lot of anglers still fish for smallmouth with tubes, especially with those big internal, weighted hooks. But Texas rigging a tube like this, and flipping and pitching, moderate to heavy cover is still a really, really good technique. And I'm going to tell you why a tube is so good. First off, a tube falls different than most other baits. And I think that is kind of one of the biggest keys to why a flipping tube is so effective, is that it has more of a glide. It will just naturally, when you pitch it, hold a little bit more air in the cavity, and as it falls, some of it will escape out of the body, but it kind of gives this bait a little bit more buoyancy in the body, where it allows it to have more of a glide than most other baits. Even other baits that have a lot of surface area and they're kind of more designed for a glide, I think a tube actually does a better job of gliding at times. Now, a lot of the glide kind of comes out of the tube when you're affixing a forward weighted Texas rig, so the sliding bullet sinker on the front. I think a lot of the gliding action kind of is taken out of the bait when that happens, just because of the placement of the weight, but it still has a cool glide. And another thing that a tube has a very erratic action on the bottom. So when you're like shaking it on the bottom, it tends to like hop all over the place. It's just a really unique action that tubes have. And it's also very subtle. There's not a lot of appendages on there. I mean, you got the tassels on the tail there, which each has its own action to it. But in general, it's still kind of a subtle action that isn't like a real boisterous flap and craw or something like that. So generally, when I'm flipping and pitching a tube, this is really important to think about, is like, what are the scenarios that you want to flip a tube over other soft plastics. And the biggest key is flipping it in situations where you want that glide. Okay, so like, generally speaking, one of my favorite scenarios for flipping a tube over other baits is standing or lay down timber. So like lay downs on the bank. If I pull into a creek, and I think about Glenn Brown, man, back in the day, there's one tournament on Fort Loudon, old FLW tournament, where he's just absolutely crushing them on a flipping tube. And it's like the perfect situation where you've got this big creek, tons of laydowns on the shoreline. And the beautiful thing about laydowns, and the reason why laydowns are really important for flipping a tube, is because even though there's a lot of cover, there's a lot of branches that are kind of sheltering those bass and attracting those bass, there's also a lot of open water in between those limbs that allow this bait to have that gliding action. You know, if you were to punch a thick grass mat with this bait, there's not enough room in that dense you know, vegetation for it to actually glide. It would have to go straight down, you know, to be able to penetrate through that cover. But with things like, you know, docks or you know, laydowns or bushes, there's usually plenty of space for it to kind of glide through that cover. And that's kind of like the prerequisite for me wanting to choose a tube over other baits. So that, you know, whenever I pull into a creek that looks like that creek that Glenn Brown fished, you know, with all those laydowns, a tube is one of the first things that comes to mind. And it is just a really good bait. And another great thing about a tube nowadays is very few people fish a tube. They're all just focused on beaver style baits like the palmetto bugs, or flap and cross style baits like the helicraws. There's a lot of different cooler designs out there that work, but the tube, if you're looking for something different to present a bass with, a flipping tube is a really good choice. Now, I wanted to talk about kind of color selection. A lot of times, man, I really like throwing black neon, especially with dirty water. If I have dirtier water, black neon is like one of my favorite flipping tube colors. It's just black with you know, with red flakes in it. Very simple, but very good for fishing you know, real dark water. Another color that you got to have pretty much with any situation is like a green pumpkin. This one's a green pumpkin with green and purple flake in it. And in fact, this is a really good color. You know, the color's actually worn off on here, so I can't tell you exactly what color this is. It's probably like green pumpkin candy or something like that. But this type of color, whether it's just straight green pumpkin or like a green pumpkin candy, really killer tube color. I think if really these are the only two colors I choose, or black neon and some type of green pumpkin, you know, tube. Really good bluegill imitation overall. But anyways, guys, oh, and another thing that I wanted to mention is how I rig it. So I don't have my hooks and my weights here where we're at here at Target House. But what I will say is generally for flipping and pitching, I'm going to be Texas rigging these baits. I'll usually use something in the like 3/16 or you know, no more than like a 3/8 ounce weight most of the time. It's usually 3/16 to 3/8, somewhere around there. And what I like to do is instead of using a rubber T-peg to peg the weight to the line, which I do want to, you know, peg the weight to the line in some way, instead of using those T-pegs that like affix the weight to the line, it's not moving at all, I like to actually put a bobber stop instead, just an inch, maybe an inch and a half in front of the weight. That way, when it hits the bottom, when I work that bait, the weight has that inch and a half or inch to be able to move around, and it really makes that tube hop around very very lively. Like, you know, it's an action that you just can't get when you peg your weight to the line, unless you peg it like a couple inches from the tube. So anyways, that's just kind of the way that I like to rig it. And usually I'm fishing like a 5/0 EWG, like the 959 hook, heavy duty EWG hook. That's really important. Like, of all the baits out there, I think that EWG is like made for a flipping tube. So anyways, guys, just wanted to do this video. I think it is a category of soft plastics that you cannot forget, and it works all year round, and it's a fish killer, man. It's proven over the years. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm gonna see you out on the water, and make sure that you trust the process.